got a good exposure, I think, to the issues back in the late 70s, but the issues that there are, and then when the panel was formed in 2015, sorry, the commission was formed in 2015, I expressed an interest in reviving my work in that area, and Chairman Buller appointed me to the commission. I served as chair last year, and actually, as an aside, Ron is doing a great job this year of carrying us through, and she can't appoint me to do anything else, so I can say that, but in all honesty. But I'm glad you all came. It's a good turnout. We appreciate it, and we encourage your questions, whatever they are about.
Good evening. I'm Richard Schott. I'm not a member of the Civilian Review Panel. I'm the Independent Police Auditor, and in that capacity, I am a full-time county employee. One reason I'm here is because the panel is comprised of civilian volunteers. It's incumbent upon my office, and I have two staff members who work with me to provide all of the administrative support that's required to keep the panel up and running and get their reports published and meetings summarized and audio tapes of all of their meetings up on their website, on the county website. I will discuss briefly, as part of the presentation, what the auditor reviews as opposed to what the panel reviews. And the relevant part of my background in that regard is I retired from the FBI after 27 years of being an agent with the FBI. And 17 of those years I spent at the FBI Academy in the legal instruction unit, where, among other legal topics, I really concentrated and focused on use of force and deadly force policy issues. And as I discuss what it is I review, you'll see why that's relevant to the relevant part of my background. So I'll echo what others have said. Thanks for being here tonight. We appreciate your interest in the process.
So now what we'd like to do with two different speakers basically is take you through what our authority is as a panel, and also take you through the complaint process, what happens when a complaint is filed. So I'm going to turn it over to Adrienne to give you a little bit of the background and also to tell you about the scope of authority that the panel enjoys.
Thank you. We're probably one of the few, if not the only place in the country that has an auditor and a civilian review panel. The commission was, some of you have been to various commission meetings or read about it, was made up of 40 commissioners and another 40 or so volunteers who built themselves up into 5 subcommittees. One of those was civilian oversight. That's the one that you all hear. We did a lot of research on best practices, what other jurisdictions did in terms of oversight. A number of those were particularly relevant. Denver, San Jose, San Francisco had sort of forward-looking policies. So the commission subcommittee on civilian oversight reviewed all of those. There were members of the police department on the committee. There were a whole range of views, from limited oversight to broader oversight, and we eventually came to the structure we have, where, as we get to our scope of authority, and he'll detail his, the auditor reviews automatically, without complaint, uses of force, deadly uses of force, let's put it that way, in serious instances. He also does all uses of force complaints where there's been a civilian complaint. The panel reviews the misconduct, alleged misconduct. That could be an abuse of authority. These are the quote words, and serious misconduct. And just to give you some examples that were listed in our action item, that's like the ordinance, that's the motivating board of supervisors legislative document. use of abusive racial, ethnic, or sexual language or gestures, harassment or discrimination based on race, color, sexual orientation, gender, religion, national origin, marital status, age, familial status, immigration status, or disability. Acting in a rude, careless, angry, retaliatory manner, or threatening manner not necessary for self-defense, reckless endangerment of a detainee, and other serious violations of the county's policies and procedures. So those are the kinds of things that we do on a complaint. I won't get into how the complaint's processed. Holly will do that down there. There are two questions we always get. The most relevant, I think, is we've always used the word review the investigations. Why doesn't the auditor and the panel investigate itself? Investigate the complaint itself. Virginia law is unclear as to the authority of the Board of Supervisors to delegate to him or to a committee, any panel, the ability to investigate. So instead what we do is in his case as well, the police department does the investigations. He monitors them as they go on. In our case, we'll wait until they complete it. And then, as Holly will explain, an individual complainant, we need to request a review, but I'll leave that to there. We don't take evidence for the same reason, because the law is not clear that we can take evidence. We do allow, I'll try not to get too much violence, we do allow for the complainant to appear before us and speak and show the details of that. So we think we've reached a good middle ground on that. But people always ask that question, so that's it's that one. And I think that's about it. There was one other thing, but I think we'll just wait and see if that comes up. And also, I can't remember what it was, so that's why we're going to wait. That's all I have on it for now.
Okay.
Answer questions about it, period. That's where we are.
We'll hold our questions till we get to the end here. I'm going to turn it over to Holly to take you through the complaint process, what happens when you receive a complaint, and how we finally get to the end of it.
Okay, so when you came in, you may have picked up a little PowerPoint present. If you didn't, that's fine, because I'm going to walk you through this. I'll go a little slow. But if you have one, you might want to turn to page 5, because I'm going to use this little diagram at the bottom of the page called the complaint process. It's right here. And if you want one, you can pass it out.
There's copies up here if anybody needs one.
Page 5, the bottom, it's called complaint process. All right, so page 5.
It's not.
Do they have a different one?
Yeah,
Oh, no.
yeah, they have a six.
Page 2.
Oh,
Just
here.
that.
Okay, whatever, the complaint process. I'm sorry, you have a different one. All right. Just find the slide that says complaint process and use the diagram. Sorry about that. So, we start by you filing a complaint, or a citizen filing a complaint. And a citizen can file 2 ways. Either directly with the police department or directly with the panel. And it can be done by emails, by mail, in person, or we can even assist you by telephone. So really, almost any way you want to try to file a complaint, we'll find a way for you to do it. Your complaint, whether you file it with us or with the police, is sent directly to the police department for investigation. As Adrian says, the panel does not conduct investigations. The police always conduct the investigation. The police have 60 days to complete the investigation, and they can request for an extension if there's cause. A determination is made as to whether the incident involves a use of force. And if it does, as Adrian said, the independent auditor follows and reviews the investigations from the outset. The panel does not get involved. After the police finish the investigation, they send a findings letter to the complainant. The complainant is the one who filed the complaint. and the panel also receives a copy. If the complainant is satisfied with the findings of the police letter, then everything stops there. If the complainant is not satisfied, then he or she may file a request for review to the panel. And you can do that either by letter, by email, anyway. All we need is a request for review. Once we have the request for review, the panel determines if it has authority to review the investigation. And we must make that determination within 30 days after receiving the investigation report. The standard we use is that the allegation in the complaint must involve abuse of authority by the police or serious misconduct by the police. Now, this is broad authority, and it would include such things as racial profiling, verbal abuse, harassment, threats, and discrimination. And remember, the alleged misconduct has to be done by the police. I should also say that the complainant doesn't necessarily have to be the one that's on the receiving end of the alleged misconduct. It could be someone who witnessed it, someone who saw it. It could be a relative. So the complainant doesn't necessarily have to experience the allegation itself. So then the panel convenes a public panel review meeting where the complainant may attend and state the reasons for filing the complaint. At that same meeting, the police will also be given an opportunity to answer questions about the investigation. And again, there's no investigation that takes place. We don't hear from any of the other witnesses. All we do is ask the complainant to set forth the reasons for the complaint, and we can ask the police questions. Every panel member before this happens has reviewed the record of the police investigation. We've gone to the police department and we've looked at the record that's available that includes all the interviews with all the witnesses, if there were any. It includes the police reports, all of them, the interview with the officer, the interview with whoever is relevant to the investigation. And so every single member of the panel in the review process has actually seen the record. Once the panel hears from the complainant and goes to the questions with the police, then we meet in open session and we review what we've heard and we discuss the investigation itself. And then we make a vote on whether or not what our findings are in that particular case. The panel has to issue a public report within 90 days after receiving the investigation report. All of this is done in open session, except for we cannot discuss in open session personnel matters, disciplinary actions, and those have to be done in closed session because of Virginia law. So that's basically it in a nutshell. I can ask questions.
The only other thing I would add to what Holly said is that the file, if there are any kind of recordings or if there's body cam footage or car footage, we review that too. So when she talks about the entirety of the file, it really is everything that was put together in terms of the investigation. And as I said in the beginning, our goal is to determine whether the investigation is thorough, accurate, impartial, objective, complete, all those words that you can think of in terms of what you think an investigation should be for putting out a result.
And I might add that how that plays out is that if, after looking at the record and talking to the complainant and talking to the police, we find that perhaps all the witnesses weren't interviewed, or perhaps there's some piece of evidence that wasn't mentioned in the report, or the police didn't do that, then we have the authority to send the record, to send the investigation back and say it's not complete, and this is what is not complete about it, and we recommend that you interview these witnesses, etc.
The other big component, I think, is that we also have the ability to make recommendations from what we've seen in the investigation file. Or if we receive complaints that tend to congregate around a particular topic and bring up a policy issue that should be addressed, we may be able to make recommendations and comments on policies and procedures within the department. So that's another reason why it's worth getting the input from the community so that we can see what's going on and be able to raise these issues appropriately with the chief.
Right, and also these forums can actually factor into those policy recommendations, because if we see a pattern of certain types of complaints and we want to hear from the public about that, for example, if we see a pattern of discrimination types of complaints, then we might want to have a forum or two to invite the public to address that particular issue. And that would give us more information to make a recommendation, if we so desire, to the Board of Supervisors to make a change.
One quick thing, I remember the other thing was, and Holly mentioned that, that's the ability of the panel to ask the police to do additional investigation. That's actually, the police is required to do that. That was one of our compromises we made in the commission, was that if the panel wasn't going to be able to investigate, if it saw a shortfall, when we haven't seen that many shortfalls, if any at all, maybe one or two, but we've talked about, we can ask them to do it, and they are obligated to is too strong a term. They will do it for us so that we can then look at a complete investigation. That was an important compromise that was made. And I would encourage you, off what both those two said, to read our annual report and reports from the reviews we have, because oftentimes recommendations there about policies come up in those reports, that you can see the things that are coming to our attention. So, and same thing is with him as well. But on our side, our reports will let you see the things that we're seeing and what recommendations we have, or at least just a comment we may have. So I would encourage you to look at the materials on the website.
I would also encourage you to, we record all of our meetings. All of our meetings are open and they're recorded. And the audio tape is on our website for every meeting. So it's easy for you to go online and listen to every meeting, and if you have an interest in a particular case, hear our discussion about that case.
Or even attend.
Or even attend.
So I'll turn it over to Richard now to tell you more about the independent auditor's role.
If I can, if you don't mind, I'm going to stand. I'm short, and we have a pretty good crowd here, so I want people in the back to be able to see me and hear me. Hopefully you can hear me in the back. And I'm not going to take much time, because I know the purpose of tonight's meeting is for interaction between the group here and the panel. Just a couple of points of clarification. As Adrian indicated, not all of my reviews requires a complaint from a member of the public. I have what I guess could be characterized as automatic review of any officer-involved shooting. And there's a distinction here. Any officer-involved shooting, and that's whether any individual is struck or not. I'm currently reviewing a police department investigation of a shooting that took place back in March where no one was struck. But it satisfies the definition of officer-involved shooting. So I'm reviewing the investigation into that use of force. I also automatically review an investigation of what is characterized as an in-custody death. And I'm currently reviewing one situation where that was the case. It happened in June of this year, and some of you may have seen the body camera footage was just released of that by Chief Rossler, and some of you may have noted that none of the officers in that situation really employed any force, but the individual did unfortunately die while he was in the custody of the Fairfax County Police Department, and that initiated my review of the investigation into the incident. One thing to point out there, when you see the term in custody death, it's in the custody of the Fairfax County Police Department, not in the custody of the Fairfax County Sheriff's Department. I have no authority to review anything, really, to be frank, involving the Sheriff's Department. And then finally, the third category is kind of subdivided. Any other use of force by a member of the Fairfax County Police Department, I review the investigation into that use of force automatically again if the force results in serious injury to the individual. And then finally, really the last remaining category is another use of force other than a shooting, and serious injury is not the result, but a member of the community makes a complaint about that use of force. That will initiate my review, or the auditor's review, who's ever in this position down the road, of the police department's investigation into that incident. And that really kind of is the full picture of my review authority. And I'll just echo what you've already heard. Like the panel, I have no investigative authority. I review the investigations being conducted by the police department. I am able, if I learn about them, and typically so far I have learned about them early on, I can monitor the investigation as it's ongoing. But if I don't hear about it until after the investigation is over, and there's one situation where that's the case, then I'm strictly conducting a review of the investigation that's already been completed. And then I am mandated by the board to issue a public report of each incident that I review. So all of my reports are published on the auditor's webpage, separate from the panel's website. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Rhonda, and I'll be here for the remainder of the evening if you have any questions or concerns to share with me. Thanks.
And with that, I'll open it up for questions from you. Yes, sir.
For those of us who followed this panel and have yet somehow have not read the annual report that's out, could you said there were 20-some cases. Could you give us a quick catalog of what those cases involved and the status of your review and disposition?
They've somewhat run the gamut, so I can't go through all 23 because actually I'm not walking around with all that in my head. We've only had actually 3 reviews. Most of the complaints that we have gotten have been initial complaints that have gone through the investigation process. And once the investigation was completed, we were not then asked to take on the review. So we've only had 3 reviews, full reviews to date. As I said, the complaints tend to run the gamut. We had one complaint, for example, where an individual was concerned about a standard report that needed to be issued after an accident, and the report was completed incorrectly. That resulted in some challenges for the individual. And they were also a bit concerned about the officer's professionalism in that case. And so we did review that when we just finished that review, and we're now working on the report. We have a situation now where we've received a complaint regarding racial profiling. Racial profiling.
Yes, thank you.
And we're really taking that into account. We have another pending complaint that had to do with what we kind of refer to as entrapment, though it may not meet the definition, the full definition of entrapment. And we have another complaint where the complainant is concerned about how missing persons policy is prosecuted within the county because it resulted in her view, in the death of an individual because they weren't found in time. False arrest is another one. So they've been somewhat all over the map, touching a lot of different issues. But as I said, we've only had the opportunity to conduct three reviews so far. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a little confused about the difference between an initial complaint and a review. When somebody files a request for review, is that considered an initial complaint?
No. What makes the distinction, that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked. What is the distinction is if the police have not investigated the incident already. So if you file a complaint, one of the first questions we ask ourselves is there an investigation on this particular matter? If it has not been, if the incident has not been investigated, then we have to send it to the police to investigate, because our charge is to review only completed investigations, completed Fairfax County Police Department investigations. So we first need to have a completed investigation before we can review it. And as Holly mentioned, we send it over to the police department to investigate. And then after the investigation is complete, the complainant has another decision point, fundamentally, because they have to decide, is my disposition letter adequate for me? Do I think this was handled appropriately? If yes, then they're finished and we have nothing further to do with it. If they have questions about it or are dissatisfied with the result, then they contact the panel to say, I'm still not satisfied with this. I want you to review the investigation. So the initial complaint is a complaint that has not been previously investigated by the police. Now, there's some people who make their complaints directly to the police department. And in that situation, we perhaps have not been involved in it at all. And so they come to us with a disposition letter already and a completed, I made this complaint, this is what the disposition letter says, I don't like it, would you review it? And in that case, we can go ahead and review the investigation.
So just a follow-up on that. So is that a procedure and policy that you all created, or is that something that was handed to you from the Board of Supervisors?
That was essentially handed to us.
Okay, because it seems to me like that's a bureaucratic barrier to people actually getting you to look into things if it has to go through, if they essentially have to say twice, I want you to look into this, that seems extra.
Fair point.
When an initial complaint goes to the police department,
Mm-hmm.
third, after that IV's done with it, findings letter, how they say goes back, the person then has an option to be satisfied or not, and request to us. We also get a report back on that initial complaint, and we have some liaisons who will look to see what developed.
Mm-hmm.
So we won't monitor or review it then, because no one's asked us to. But every complaint comes in, we know what happens to it and the reasons why. So if we were to see a trend, even amongst things that people didn't complain to us about, we could say, there's been 4 of these, pick false arrests, something like that, whatever it is, maybe there's an issue there. So there's a way for us to get them, even if people aren't complaining. So aren't requesting reviews. We will see them in any event. And the police department has been very cooperative in helping us understand the basis for each of their decisions.
You want to make a
Yeah,
comment?
ma'am, who asked a question about, just a quick question, just for clarification. In terms of your critique about the bureaucracy, would you like a system where if you make an initial complaint, it automatically gets reviewed regardless of the disposition?
Yeah, I don't